Hola manos, welcome to our ipsicafé scoping series where we take an idea and scope it live in real time, 1 hour at a time. My name's Alejandra, I'm a strategist and community organizer. And
I am Lizzie Lee, a project strategist and a systems thinker.
the first idea that we are scoping under this series is to create a blueprint that allows us to intentionally build and interweave our networks so we can strengthen our communities and more effectively translate people power into structural change-making power. We're going to have Lizzie give us a little recap of what we've done in the 7 episodes we have had so far.
Yeah, thank you. So based on the purpose of the project and seeing everything as a system, we started with a general brainstorming, asking a lot of questions based on the 5W and H framework, asking what, who, where, when, why, and how, and many questions for every idea. And after we thought everything that we capture, all the elements of the systems, we categorize them, and we created several groupings based on certain common characteristics. And after that, we finalized last week the interconnection of all the elements as a system is not just a group of elements, it is a group of elements interconnected to achieve a purpose. So we also walked the presentation or the recordings through the whole process, and now we are here to continue with this copying series.
Cool. So yeah, we've done all that categorizing. You can see on the screen the map where we left off. And yeah, we will carry on. So without anything else, let's get to scoping. So as we always do, I will note our starting time over here so we can keep track of our time. I'm going to start a new area because we will be moving all of this information over to our work breakdown structure. So if you give me 1 second, I will get to do that. And this is all very much an experiment. This is, of course, we've done this process many times before, but this is the first time that we're doing it and talking about it in real time. So some things have changed in how we do that. So one of those things is how we do the work breakdown structure. Usually I do a little bit of it, the draft before the connections, and then do the connections and finish it after. But we figured this time it'd be a little simpler to kind of talk about it all in one session. So do bear with us as we try to figure out precisely how this new process is going to go. Do you have anything to add at this time, Lizzie?
No, I'm very excited to see how we put this as a WBS. This is one of the main or most important elements in scoping, how we break down the big goal into lower levels to get to the particular how we are going to do this. So I'm very excited for that, to show that.
Okay, so the way I usually work is in trying to bring all the colors into view, essentially. So I will kind of do that. Here we have, I'm bringing in the different categories that we identified, and then I'm essentially going to create little boxes that will represent each of those. Six. And this is all of the little things behind the scenes making all of these things happen. So I create boxes with the different colors and align them all. And then essentially I'm going to create what is I would say level 1, no, level 2, right? Because level 1 is kind of the project definition, and then level 2, would you say that?
Correct.
Categories
Yes.
would be level 2.
Yes.
All right. And I think, are you
And
on
this
the,
is sorry to interrupt. This is a simple way that we have found out to build the WBS. If you go to any books, you are going to see like you have to do this. The question that we always have answer is how do you do it? Because it's very easy to say, okay, do the categories. How do you know which the categories so are? So that's how the process that we have done so far in the 7 previous episodes is going to take us to now that how to. And it's I like to call it like a low-hanging fruit, because after I have the categories now as a low-hanging fruit, we have the WBS first as a draft, and then we will check all the connections. As Alejandro would say, you can do the draft before, then you check the connections and you make sense of what you're putting on your project, and then you will have your final WBS, which is critical for scoping.
yes, very much so. So, are you on the whiteboard, Lizzie?
I am not, but I could be. I am there. I already have it.
Yeah, so maybe you can help me bring in the bubbles.
Oh,
If you start
sure.
from the right, so if you start with purple, I'll start from the left and start with orange, and then we can just pop them in under there, and then we can start discussing what it is that we do
Okay.
with all of them, if that makes sense.
Yes. So I'm taking purple.
And we copy them. Oh, it's a little bit messy at the beginning, but it works out. Again, what we're doing here is trying to gather all of the different colors, because what we want is, now that we have an idea of kind of how all of these things relate to one another, we really want to explore the different categories on their own as well. I think in a previous session, I talked about the process being a combination or different iterations of divergence and convergence. And here's one point where we start looking at the different categories and the different elements that we've identified within them and figure out, is this category complete? Are these areas that perhaps...
Okay. Sorry. You were working yellow.
Yeah, I was thinking I can go from left to right and you can go from right to left.
Okay. I'm going to now, sorry,
Gray.
gray. Perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
No worries.
I missed that part of the process.
Well, we're making it up as we go along, so it's all good. But as I was saying, now that we're looking at each of the categories, we can focus a little bit more in these particular areas and start to think about it a little more with more depth and see where perhaps there were elements that we did not identify. This is also a point where some of the bigger categories, for example, blue is a really big category that we have, where it might make sense where it'll start to become clear how the different categories can be perhaps subdivided or even divided completely into other categories altogether. Because the connections will remain as we did them, but it might be that we rename the categories, combine categories, separate categories. That's all part of this analysis process. And I'm
Yeah,
moving.
and I always like to make the analogy, and I have done it like every time that we meet in this series, that imagine the categories a drawer in your chest of drawers or your closet, and then you can have one that is for clothing, and then you have their tops, bottoms, underwears, etc. But then if you have too much clothes, maybe you want to break it down. Oh, you just want a drawer for tops, drawer for bottoms, etc. So that's what happens here when we have a lot in the blue. We kept that as blue as one category, but then when we did the mapping last week, the interconnections, we found a way to have those different drawers for the blue category to make them more compact, because if not, things are disorganized, or you really don't know what belongs to what to where. I think I'm gonna redo those bubbles,
What does that mean? Which bubbles?
the blue. So
What do you mean? Oh, like,
I'm gonna bring them already with the categories as we did in the interconnection.
okay.
So that work is already done, right? Oops. So this is, I don't know what happened. What we call this would be like the different drawers in blue.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to go ahead and put some names into our top boxes so they're nice and easy to read. And then just a quick review, we have the orange category, which is essentially the process of blueprint, of the development of the blueprint. It's this project specifically that we are currently planning and ideating, essentially. Yellow then is the humans that will contribute to creating this blueprint. So these are essentially the experts and the other knowledgeable people that we will interview, engage with, their knowledge, their research, whatever it might be that will help us create a better output. Then we have green, which is what we have right now titled areas of interest or points of gather. And as we can see from the large bubble, we really grouped all of that into communities. So these are essentially different ways people form communities within different spaces. Then we have blue, which is the blueprint output, the actual output of this project, what we're gathering to do, what we're planning here to produce. Gray then is the barriers that we have identified. Again, this is an example of a category that is not fully developed. Obviously, there are significantly more than just a handful of barriers, but that is where that divergence and convergence comes in. Yes, we've identified barriers, we've identified a couple of those, but now as a category, once we're looking at it specifically isolated, we've connected it already through the sessions where we mapped it all out, and now we're going to get to a point where we can look at each of these categories as isolated, I guess, and then we can go about discussing, okay, what other barriers could we be facing? What other things related to barriers could we be perhaps not considering yet? And then we have purple, which currently is titled core values / foundation. And these are both in terms of how we work, so how we want to develop this project, but also in terms of the output of this project, the blueprint itself, how it takes that into consideration. Again, not just during this project, but also as the product, as the output. what could that look like and how could that impact it? I think one of the most challenging parts of this process is not getting caught up in the names. Sometimes I've found myself doing this process, I found myself spending a significant amount of time just stuck trying to find the perfect name for something. And I think giving yourself permission to just name some approximation is one of the best things we can do, because eventually a better or a good enough name will come along. It doesn't have to be from the beginning. So, like I said, humans creating the blueprint as the title of Yellow might not be the best name right now. Might not be the best name in terms of the project overall, but it's a good enough name for the process where we are right now. Eventually, better names come, but that is shouldn't be a point to get stuck on, because it's very, very easy to stay there, and it's not worth it, because eventually, with more information and more time, better names do emerge.
Yes, and this is when we talked about free flow of ideas, the naming is part of that free flow. We have our lives many times ruled by strict uh, rules and regulations, and we have to do this, and this is how things must be done. And here the brain plays tricks on us, like, oh, what is the name? And then we get it's amazing. It seems simple or like a silly thing, but many times we get like, bogged down with what is the right name. Move on. Do not worry, because the core is not the name. The core is what that name represents. And it is a name that whenever that name talks to everybody in the team, that's okay. And it can evolve, definitely. But it is very important to recognize how the brain tricks us to follow a pattern, rules, like being in a box. And that's what we find with this process is so liberating, because we just go with the flow. We just go with the free flow of ideas, right? Whatever, it will come up later, right? So trust that, which is very, very important to have this free flow of ideas. And it's a process, but it moves freely. It's like a river, right? It has a path, but it moves freely, depending on many circumstances around the environment of that river.
Look at you with your analogies. Perfect.
Yeah, I love rivers.
All right, so how does it looking? Have we brought everything? I think we have it.
I think we have.
Yeah, okay. So let's have a little bit of time to just look at these and think through perhaps I think there are some barriers that we're missing.
Yes, I don't know what happened to them.
It's okay.
My
I'll bring
bad.
them over.
Okay.
I'll bring them over.
Yeah, and that's because in the original, when we have all the elements, and this is one of the things that we have mentioned, when we have the elements, we have two barriers or two gray areas. And when we were doing the mapping, two or three more elements showed up. And we can go back to the big bubble with all the elements inside, or that's it. So that's what this is free, right? Free as in freedom, not as in no payment. And this is what that freedom means, that not because you put two gray bubbles. I don't know, Alejandra, if you want to show the other ones that didn't have, it only had two, and then we created more as we move forward. So
which ones?
the gray. So and that's what I have them two there, because originally when we finished the categorization and all the elements. We have only 2 or 3 grays, 3 gray ones. And when we were doing the interconnections, 2 or 3 more came up to our minds. And so that's what, when I copy these, I copy them from the bubble instead of from the mapping. So that's what they are missing right there.
No worries.
Just
It's
to
all
confuse everybody. I'm doing this just to confuse
like you
everybody.
said, it is an ever-flowing process. And if from the beginning we started with a very general brainstorm and then we categorized, and then as we were connecting some elements, we changed categories, some we combined into broader categories. So it is, I think that is part of the process, is allowing that fluidity, because I think it helps. That is one, before I had kind of this process to follow, that was one of the most difficult things for me in order to start something. I felt like I had to have already certain answers. I had to know what categories I needed to think of. I had to know what things needed to be named. And that almost felt like an impediment to being able to start. So I think being able to show what that fluidity looks like and how non-problematic it is to switch things around after, or rename things after the fact. I think it's a good way to model that. So I don't know why buy-in and skills ended up just floating in there. I think buy-in was alone, and then
Buy-in was alone, yes.
and
And
then
skills, I think
skills.
it fell, skills was in the group dynamics.
Yeah, there
And
it is.
it fell when I was dragging.
No worries. I just want to confirm that we have everything in the blue. Okay. So where shall we start?
Yeah, we can start left to right or anywhere. Brain will dictate you how you want to start. I am a
Okay, but
clockwise
let's
person. There are
start.
other people that can start with green right away. It doesn't matter.
Okay, but
So, but before you start, I want to now, if you see this, I think it start talking to you, right? Like, oh, look at how the WBS is, right? You have the first level, that is the purpose of the project. The second level, that are the categories or the objectives, or however you have defined your categories, and then you will have third levels, and from the third levels you will have 4 or 5, as depends on the complexity of the project. It will grow until you get the tasks for your project that will tell you, do this. Right now they are still elements, group of things. So what it means there is not like all the orange belong to the third level. Probably you have there, probably no, most likely, and for sure, you have third and fourth and probably 5 levels there. I don't know. I'm not reading those particulars right now, but that's what it means. Doesn't mean that all these colors below the second level belong to a third. They will be segregated further.
okay, so let's start with the orange.
Yes, so I would like to start with the 10 AOKs. For those that are joining for first time, the AOKs are the areas of knowledge that PMI has had for decades as the areas that we for sure project manage. And that's pretty much what it will inform many of the processes and the inputs and outputs of all the activities that we're going to do. So that's one level of itself altogether. And that was a nice airplane. So that would be and standing alone, like this third level is, we can call it the project plan. And then fourth level will be the scope plan, the time plan, the cost plan, the quality plan, etc. So you can put that there like on the third level. Theo, maybe we can call it 10 OKs project plan, and
Are you
and
suggesting a new bubble? I'm trying to, or
maybe just for mm, maybe just for the visual that these are not one exclusive level. You know what I mean? So that it's not one level that is scope time. I mean, we will have a project plan that includes all those elements. And from each of those elements, from the scope plan, you will have things below. And from the cost plan, you will have things below. So maybe just to give it like a hierarchy in the 10AO case, if that makes sense. So it would not be a new bubble. You can put 10 OKs, project management plan, parentheses, 10 AOKs. So take that little bubble that is inside the big bubble, like outside. I can, perfect, yeah. And that would be like something like here, like that. So that, because we will have a,
okay. So we will have a project plan, and then it will include those 10 areas that we discussed. As Lizzie mentioned, depending on the complexity of the project, these areas may or may not be relevant, but it is always really important to at least consider them. Some will always be relevant. You always have to, at least in our or my opinion, you always have to define the scope of your project. You always have to define the timeline that you have, but it might be that you don't have to procure anything for your project, or it might be that you are doing a project by yourself, so partners or integration or even communications are not as important or as necessary. But having just the list of the 10 areas is really good, because then you can run through them and make a conscious decision. It's not that you forgot to think about procurement, is that you made a conscious decision that it is not something you need for your particular project.
right. And that's a true statement for everything here, right? It's better to input and then, okay, I don't need this. Because sometimes when we do the brainstorming from the very beginning, we suggest or we recommend just throw out there anything that comes out of your brain. Why? Even if it's something similar, oh, maybe this is similar to that particular element that somebody already said, it doesn't matter. Maybe it is, maybe it's semantics, but maybe it is not. Maybe your meaning for that particular element is different, even if it's the same wording that for another person. So here, the more is the better. And then we will be cleaning this up as we go. Like Alejandro said, procurement, if you are doing something small that you don't have to procure, you don't have suppliers, fine, but you put it there because that will trigger you. Do I have to buy anything? Do I have to contract somebody? And that will help you with that process of those questions for every idea that you have. If you don't have to, then you remove procurement. But you have it there because it's one important element in case that you need a third party supplying something for your project.
Yes, and as I'm showing here, connections are part of everything. Yes, we did a map that connected the flow of information, but the WBS is also very much connected. We can see at the top, as Lizzie mentioned earlier, this is our first level, and that is the purpose of our project. And then our second level is all of these categories, and they are directly connected to that purpose. And now I'm going to connect as we discuss each of the elements, each of the categories and the elements within them, we also want to make sure that they are connected to be able to visualize what the flow is and what the levels, like Lizzie said, the hierarchy of work will be. Because again, this is a work breakdown structure. We're trying to figure out how to break down that purpose at level 1 into tasks that we can take on and do very easily. So creating a blueprint that is going to support us in building and interweaving our networks is a very large ask. But this is exactly what this process is helping us do, is how do we get from that into very specific tasks that when combined will lead us to that blueprint. And the first that we've identified, because we come from the project management space, is creating our project plan. And that the way we structure it, at least under the guidance of PMI, which is the Project Management Institute, is using those 10 areas of knowledge. Okay.
Yeah, and this is something that is not also this is not a linear process, because the WBS is part of this code plan, right? So it is something that you are doing back and forth, and you have many of these elements already thought out, but it is and this is now the structure vertically, that together with the mapping and the interconnections that we finalized last session, you will have the roadmap to proceed with your execution.
Precisely. And I just really quickly wanted to show the map on the screen because I think it's helpful to kind of have that visual. As we pointed out, and I made it into having a thicker border, the beginning and the end of the project. We have we can see kind of where the project starts and on the top left, and where we have it ending on the bottom right. So going back to our work breakdown structure, what would you say is in store for us next? Done.
Yeah, so the what have others done? Yeah, it is kind of a first level, because that was kind of the kickoff of the project, right? We want to weave a network. First question, and that's how we defined the start. What have others done, right? And that was our first pass. And with the mapping of the interconnections, we saw how many of the elements that are in the whole systems go back and forth to that question, that what have others done. So I would put that at the same level of the project plan, and probably underneath I would put that how are they doing it, and problem identification validation would be like the last one, like another level. And
can you give us a little bit of insight into how the order of these elements might differ from the order in the map that we worked on in the last few sessions?
Can you say that again or rephrase it? I'm not sure that I understood the question.
So, for example, if we go back to the map that we created, we start with what others have done, and then have a couple, then we go into problem identification, and then go into the 10 AOKs, and then go into a whole bunch of yellow things.
True.
And then, so I'm not saying I don't think we need to do it in this order, but I thought it might be helpful to go into how it might differ a little bit, like the relationships, what we're trying to show in the work breakdown structure versus what we're showing in the map. Does that make sense?
Yes, and the thing is, so when we go, if you, and that's what I would like to separate him. And if you go back to the WBS,
Here we are.
and what I see there is two big groups of things. And because here the hierarchy doesn't have to do with flow, right? So maybe because I am a left to right person and a clockwise, I would have the what have others done like on the left, but that's okay. It doesn't matter, but it matters to me. But again, we want to have
That's
this
fine. We
free
can do
flow,
that.
right? So the thing is, and the what have others done is going to, it's like a big title. And then we are going to define there how we are going to do it, right? So we are going to define all the steps to find out what have others done. How are they doing it would be one of the questions. And at the end, we are going to have the problem identified and validated with the feedback of the other elements, right? Because this is not just a standalone orange. This is informed by a lot of the other color elements. Now, once that we have that portion, and I can see that sometimes as level of work, then once that we have that, we are going to create a project plan. Project plan is a very important step in the hierarchy of the development of a program or of a project. So that's how I see it, like at the same level. That doesn't mean, and this is, I'm glad that you brought that question that I didn't understand at the beginning, but it is very important because, again, the brain is going to trick us to think on a certain order, right? And it has nothing to do with order. Now, it has to do of how your processes work or how you manage your activities. And again, this particular project, many people with a lot of experience, as much experience or more than we have, they can come up with a different WBS and
Precisely.
it will be okay. It's the WBS and everything that we do here has to make sense to the team that is performing the project. There's a logic behind. That's why critical thinking is so important. It's not like, oh, let me throw all these bubbles, just put them in the blender and they are going to come with different colors or mixed colors and it will be okay. No, there's a critical thinking process. There's a logic behind it. It has to answer questions. And one of the things that I read that recently, maybe like a month or 2 months ago. If you want to understand something, explain it. So if you're able to explain your methods and your WBS to somebody else, it's understandable because you are able to understand it because you explain it. If you get like, oh, and it happens
I
sometimes
mean,
to us.
explain it and then someone else has to understand it, not just
Right,
explain.
right. And sometimes we said, what did we mean here? What, because sometimes we forget when we throw ideas in the first pass of the bubbles in the first, second episode. What did I mean here? What was, I mean, we have skills here, we have skill span. What was the difference? You know, we have those questions. And as long as we are able to answer those questions are satisfiable for satisfiable? Is that a word? For everybody,
Satisfying.
then satisfying for everybody, then we are okay. So that's why I don't know if I answered with all this perorating your question, but that's how this order doesn't have, it's not
Yeah, it's
sequential.
not mathematical. Like
It,
that's the
exactly.
it's not like 2 + 2 = 4. This isn't a process where everyone that applies it is gonna have exactly the same answer. Like Lizzie said, this is gonna there's a million different people would plan this project in a million different ways. And as she said, it just has to make sense, have a logic behind it, and make sense to the team that is going to be executing the project. Do you agree with the current setup that I have for Orange?
Yes, and one thing here that when we and this I don't know how far are we going to go in the whole series to the breakdown of more up to what level. Normally we leave it like on the third or fourth level, or organize all the bubbles that we have. But there are more bubbles that are gonna come, or tasks, actually not bubbles, but tasks. So for example, when I say, what have others done? What tasks are there? Oh, we have to do research, and the research is somewhere else. And how we're going to do the research? Oh, we are going to go to these particular universities, papers, or these peers type of documentation, and we are going to review 10 books, and we are going to go all newspapers. So then you start breaking that down into tasks, because that's right now, what have others done? It's a very large question. Yeah, right. It's a very large question. So how do I know what have others done? Now you start breaking that. Now you start splitting hair, right? Now you start going down to the weeds and how you are going to evaluate that. And those things are also part of the WBS, but they are the bottom level, which would be the tasks. It is like, I'm going to New York. First thing is, I need to think on the travel, the flight, the hotel, this stuff. And then you, at the end is, I walk out of the door. That's a task. So that's very important.
Okay, thank you. Can you think of anything that we don't have in terms of this category? Like if we're thinking about blueprint development and the process that we're going to take on for the next, I don't know how many months, um, beyond the actual planning of the project. And obviously a lot more can come later, because the project plan itself does contribute to thinking about things that we may have not thought of yet. But does anything come to mind right now that we might not be including here?
No, not so far.
Okay. I think one of the reasons why I had what others have done and how are they doing it on the right is because then I feel like it ties really well into the yellow category. So that is essentially that that group is identifying, okay, who are we going to rely on, whose knowledge, whose research, whose experience um, are we going to look at and investigate, read about, talk to them about, in order to get a better understanding of who knows most about this, how are they doing it, who is doing it. But yeah, so we're looking, if there's nothing on orange, I think we can move on to yellow.
Yeah, and I think that we could start, and feel free to provide your feedback. Who is already doing this? It would be for me like the first level. And then after that, we will check. So as a derivative of those, below that would be, who are the most knowledgeable people? Who are they? And existing networks. How do you see it?
Well, I think
Or most knowledgeable first?
I think most uh I think most knowledgeable and who is already doing this, I see kind of parallel, because most knowledgeable people aren't necessarily
Doing it.
doing it, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
part of the what, because we've done this over so many sessions over so many weeks, that is another thing that makes it a bit more difficult. Usually we would, while this process takes some time and it requires we like us to let the brain marinate and process the information. Usually we would be doing this over a couple of weeks at most, so the information is quite fresh. I think because we've extended this over quite a couple of months, over like a few months at this point. I think every session we have to do a little bit of a refresher. So when we're talking about this in who is already doing this, I think we're talking about, I'm assuming we're talking about building and interweaving networks, right? But there might be knowledgeable people, as we can see by one of the bubbles that we identified, that could be academics that study community organizing, but aren't necessarily doing it. So I see that as kind of two sort of different areas. There could be people who know about it because they study it or because they have some adjacency to it, and then people who know about it because they're doing it. So actually, maybe most knowledgeable people would be at the top, and then that could be tied to, on the one side, who is doing it, which could be community organizers, change makers,
and existing networking.
Well, existing networks, I was thinking
it would work for both, right?
Yeah, because I think maybe even that could be first, in the sense of, or I don't know, or next to, because I'm thinking of, I think when we identified existing networks is trying to figure out who in our existing networks might fit into these most knowledgeable people. So it could be a starting point, but it's not a limiting factor. There might be very knowledgeable people who we don't currently have in our networks that we will reach out to because they have particular knowledge, experience, or some information that could contribute. So how do you see those?
Yeah, and that's the nuance or the tailoring of every different project, right? So you could say, okay, my first thing would be go to the existing networks and then get informed from them on who the MKPs are. That would be an approach depending on what I have. But if I don't even have a network, which could very well happen, then I have to do some research in a different way. Who is already doing this, right? And when the who is already doing this, I said, who are the most knowledgeable people about this? So it is, and that's why this is so, I'm going to say beautiful, but this is so rewarding.
I like nuanced, the word you used.
Because it is, you have to tailor again to make it relatable to your situation. For example, Alejandra has a community network way larger than mine. So I would think, well, you go to your existing networks and then you find out who is doing that from your network and who are the most knowledgeable people in parallel. If I want to build something and I don't have a network that is relevant or is substantial, I can go to the people that I can say who is already doing this. And then I go to my local geography, find out who's doing it. And then from there, I can go to the most knowledgeable person. And then from my existing network that probably is in something different, related to something different, then I can find who in my existing network can support that. So it is not black or white. It is, it depends on your system, your current system.
Yes, but I think for our particular use case, I'm gonna go with, let's begin with my existing network, or our existing network, because I do think that will sometimes, as Lizzie was saying, sometimes we don't have particular access to humans or knowledge to complement what we need for a project. So we have to go to the internet, to libraries, these repositories of information. But often, I don't know if it's because I'm ADHD or because I don't know. But it can be really overwhelming, the amount of information that is out there. So I think because I do have not a huge network, but I do think I have a significant network that particularly relates to this subject matter. I think that might help narrow down and get us focused on just kind of work with a smaller sample, not to limit the research, but to start somewhere concrete. And then from there, like you were saying, we might be able to identify those people within our existing networks can help us identify most knowledgeable people that might be outside, and it can expand from there. Because I can think of the top of my head people who are doing this that I know, academics who I know, people who are highly knowledgeable, who I know, change makers. I think we both have people we know that are making significant changes in their community, and community organizers. So I'm not quite sure how we want, because this is not an exhaustive list. When we identified academics, change makers, community organizers, it wasn't like, oh, these three categories are precisely the three categories we need to look at, right? We were brainstorming, and those were the three things that we mentioned. So I don't know if, I think with academics, I just want to add this. For example, academics, because there could be other types of people that could be knowledgeable. Policy peeps, obviously community organizers are very much at the top. I actually want to switch these.
Yeah, and the MKPs that are also known by as SMEs, subject matter experts, or even though I think that's more technical, it like you said, allows to narrow, right? Because MKPs about particular network, if we say that, you can have the whole world and start looking there, right? But that will narrow when you start with your existing network.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful. Okay, so I think I'm trying to think of what else we would want to do with this category, in terms of identifying. I think if we look at orange, I think the project plan is kind of at least the first draft will be kind of our first point of action, because I think the left hand column, what have others done, how are they doing it, problem identification and validation, all that will come from this, what I consider in the yellow, our first point of order, which will be reaching out to existing networks, right?
Right, right.
Okay,
And
so I think
and
those
that's how
two.
yeah, and that's how you start putting out the actions, right? Because existing network, we don't have an action there. But then or MKPs, we don't have an action. Who are they? There's no action. And that's when you start like changing from an element to a task. Maybe that would become determine who are the most knowledgeable people. And then you put these steps there for you to determine. I'm gonna call Jane Doe. I'm gonna call the school of thoughts that is around the corner. I'm going to go to this policy change makers meeting in the city hall. So that's how you start doing that, breaking down. So it doesn't mean that each of these elements, it will have many below. When you see that, you may say, oh, most knowledgeable people, maybe I just put the determine, and that becomes a task, and then you put these steps to develop that task.
Yeah, I think one of the things with identifying kind of the first focus is that we can, for example, under Orange project plan, we know exactly how to go about that next step would be like you said, looking at the 10 areas of knowledge and ideating what those will look like for this project. So that would be kind of our first point of order with orange. With yellow, I think it can be reaching out to our existing networks, and it can even be try to figure out, get recommendations on the other 5 bubbles. Who do you think? That can be even my questionnaire for the people in my networks. Who do you think the
Correct.
most knowledgeable people in community organizing are? Who do you have specific examples of organizers in your community that are really good, not just about at organizing, but at interweaving networks, because that is part of the crux of what we're trying to do, not just focusing on organizing, but how do we look at how are people who are weaving their communities, their existing communities with other organized communities in order to have that multiplier effect, which brings us back to the last bubble that we have in orange. So I think I like the idea of starting with existing networks, because then the following 5 bubbles can be asking those people in our networks for recommendations on, or even for us, our task could be create a list of people within
Mhm.
our existing networks that fit within those categories that we have.
Perfect.
Um,
Yes.
cool. All right. And then maybe we do a couple of minutes on green, and then I think we can wrap it up for the day. Or do you think that's a good place
How
to
many minutes we have
maybe 5?
left? 5?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we can, I don't know. I don't know. Um,
Well, maybe that's a good place to stop.
yes, I think so, because if not, we are gonna have to bring back the idea, and it's always nice to make it fresh, to start from fresh. So yeah,
Exactly.
I love this, how this process is going, in the sense of that question, like you said, all the things that you're doing with the existing networks, and how you're going to determine all the steps that come after that. And that's why, all these 5 bubbles below the existing networks could become tasks, could become part of a list, could become part of a survey, could become part of an interview or a meeting. And but the thing is that all these have to come down to an action, because the action is what is going to move you, right? Just
Yeah,
existing
exactly.
network standing point, the making a list of the existing network, now you're moving into a direction to get something out of that. So that's critical to for the WBS.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's a perfect a place to pause for now. Um, we are going to continue next Tuesday. It will be June 9th, same time, same place. As we always say, for anyone who's looking for support with their specific idea, project, or strategy, we offer free office hours every week, and the link to sign up is in the description. We are very excited because we're planning our first ipsicafé special event for the second half of this year. So you can follow our LinkedIn pages to stay up to date on that. Is there anything else you would like to add at this point, Lizzie?
No, thank you very much for leading the effort once more time, and hope to see everybody next week.
All right, get some rest y hasta la próxima.